Hi, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. This is Greg. I am in Buffalo, New York, in the United States, and as you can hear, my voice is a little hoarse, a little rawer than usual because I just returned from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where I saw propaganda 3 nights in a row at the Park Theater. So I figured I would do a little podcast recording while my memory of these events is fresh so I can document it with as much detail as possible and put it out there and see what kind of commentary and feedback I get from people who were also there. So before we get into that, I just want to do like a little, recap kind of thing. So Keith and I started the podcast in 2020 as a pandemic sanity project. And we started when no live music was going on, and it was a way for us to connect over our shared love of propaganda. But also, more than that, heavy music, hardcore, metal, punk, social issues, parenting, relationships, friendships. And with me in my house in Buffalo and Keith in his house in northwestern Indiana, both on lockdown, both inside, we both found ourselves without a main outlet in our lives, which was live music. And when we were toying with what song to do first after we committed ourselves to trying to make this podcast, I remember thinking that Banger's Embrace was the perfect choice. It just made sense to me in the moment. It was positive. It was about live music. It was about joy. It was about youthful nostalgia. So basically, the Banger's Embrace was about everything the spring of 2020 was not. So, seeing the photo of Chris and Todd on the inside of the Sacrifice Propaganda split 7-inch at the Opera House in Toronto in a state of sheer glee in the mid-2000s was a total opposite vision of what I felt about life and the world in April and May of 2020. So I said, Keith, let's do Banger's Embrace as our first song episode. And that episode's complimentary episode is the Anthem and Technocracy episode, which features Joe Rico and Rob Urbanati from Sacrifice as guests, because that's the band that Chris and Todd went to Toronto to see, which they documented in the Banger's Embrace. So our Banger's Embrace episode was released on June 21st, 2020, which as of this writing on October 11th, 2021, is 477 days ago. So let's do a little more recap, shall we? We have done 62 numbered song episodes, but we have actually talked about 66 songs to the best of my recollection, because the George Samolesky episode, number 51, talks about 3 songs, and the Chris Hanna episode, 60, talks about 3 songs as well. So our introduction episode isn't a song, so it really should be episode 0 if I look back on that, but oh well. And we've also done 9 bonus episodes, and as of the time of, looking at this, the podcast has been downloaded 154,000 times in dozens of countries. The Winnipeg Free Press did a story about the show on the Arts and Life section. Globalnews.ca did a story about my trip this weekend, which was funny, and I put a link to that on Twitter and on our link tree, which you can find in our Instagram and Twitter bios. And we've compiled 20 plus cover versions of propaganda songs that were either made specifically for this podcast or pre-existed elsewhere, and I got permission from the singers to put them in the show. And Keith and I have also hung out virtually for hundreds of hours at this point. So I just got back from Winnipeg, which I said, which was one of the most amazing experiences imaginable for me. And when the band announced a Western Canada tour with Choke a few months back, the air of uncertainty around these shows was palpable. I bought a ticket to the Saturday, October 9th show in Winnipeg thinking that it was just a total fantasy pipe dream, and I would just be like, giving the band $31 Canadian. And, because the border was quote-unquote open, but I figured like all along that I would get to the border and the agents would say, "Are you insane? You're not coming in here. Go home, idiot. Oh, and by the way, you're banned from Canada for 10 years." Like, that's legitimately how I played the border crossing in my mind's scenario a million times. And I can't even begin to measure the amount of productive hours of my life that I have lost to being stressed out about the trip. And this is for real. Like, I was like having like a week-long panic attack essentially before I left, which is one of the reasons we didn't make an episode after the state lottery, is just that I was just so stressed out, mind-bogglingly stressed as I've ever been about anything, I think. And if you ask anyone that I was texting in advance of the trip, I was basically like in a week-long doom spiral. I didn't even make any plans in Winnipeg beyond a tentative place to stay and a tentative ride from the airport, but I was in my mind certain that I would not even arrive in Winnipeg. So it was just like, oh, why bother planning? I'm not even going to be there. It's just like all a fantasy. So I typed some notes in the Winnipeg airport earlier, and I'm not even sure. I wasn't even sure at like the time of getting to the airport in Winnipeg yesterday that I would even arrive at my house in Buffalo. I was like, anything can happen. So this was my entire approach to this trip. Like, anything could happen. It could be horrendous. It could be magical. And it was almost entirely magical. And I did, in fact, make it home. The American border agents couldn't care less about me coming back into the country. The border agents were maskless at the U.S. border. The agents were masked at the Canadian border. The shows in Winnipeg were totally masked, and the shows that I've been to in the U.S. have been almost entirely unmasked, like this summer and early fall. So it really is a tale of two parallel countries having different experiences at the moment. So I'll go into the story now for the entire weekend. I slept 4 hours leading up to my trip, and I left my house on Friday, October 8th at 1:45 a.m. I got gas so that I had a full tank when I was driving back from Canada, and I hit the Lewiston-Queenston Bridge just north of Niagara Falls at about 2:15 in the morning. I showed them my ArriveCan app information. I showed them my physical vaccine card. We had a little chit-chat with the border agent, and then I drove and hit the Hamilton airport at 3:45 a.m. I then laid out some yoga mats, a fluffy blanket and pillow that I borrowed off my daughter's bed, and I laid down in the back of my SUV, which fortunately is big enough for me to lay in, to try to grab 2 to 3 hours of sleep before the flight. Hey, this is Greg. I am at John C. Munro International Airport in Hamilton, Ontario. It's 4:11 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, and I went across the border at probably 2:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Lewiston-Queenston Bridge between Western New York and Southern Ontario. And the drive here was shrouded in fog the entire time. And I have an 8:30 a.m. flight from Hamilton to Winnipeg. So my flight is in about 4.5 hours, and I am currently laying in the back of my Toyota Highlander on my daughter's 2 yoga mats stacked up and a blanket, and I'm going to try and get a little bit of sleep before I catch this flight in just a little bit. And allegedly, I'm going to see Propaganda tonight in Winnipeg, which will be my first time seeing them since the Failed States Tour in 2012, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with these recordings. Maybe I'll do a little travel diary bonus podcast episode, and I'm just recording this on my phone. I have a recorder in my bag, so if any interview opportunities arise while I'm in Winnipeg, we'll see what happens. I am very minimalist on the gear at the moment, so we'll kind of see how it goes. But yeah, in theory, in 4.5 hours, I'll be taking off from here in Hamilton for a 2-hour flight, landing in Winnipeg at about 10:30 in the morning, and I'll be beelining to Palmerston and Ruby Street. What happened instead is that I laid there with my eyes closed for 2 hours, got no sleep, and basically was like, welp, here we go. Hey, it's Greg. It is 5:51 a.m. I'm at Monroe Hamilton International Airport, still half in the back seat, half in the boot of my car. Oh, I can't really tell if I slept or not. I seem to have a memory of seeing my cat with a mouth full of human teeth. That means I had a dream, right? Please tell me I got some sleep. Oh my God, this is going to hurt. Oh, if you see me at the show on a Friday night in Winnipeg and I don't have any idea what I'm talking about, it's because this is what my journey to the show has been like, laying in the back seat of a car. Oh, man. So I went through security at the Hamilton Monroe International Airport. I got on a plane. I flew the 2 hours to Winnipeg. I didn't fall asleep on the plane either. But by then I was committed to 24 hours of wakefulness because I got to see Propagandy and I knew that I would be surging with adrenaline even though I hadn't slept in almost a full 24 hours, and that everything would be fine. I knew that I would get to sleep eventually and that after the first show I would just crash out really, really hard and I would feel better on Saturday. So I landed in Winnipeg at 10:45 a.m. on Friday morning. And Dylan James from the Winnipeg band Clipwing, and he's also the guest on the funeral procession episode, picked me up at the airport, and he asked me what I had planned, and I said absolutely nothing. I didn't think I would be here, and but now that you ask, please take me to Palmerston and Ruby Street, and then let's go to the Royal Albert Arms, and then we'll eat lunch. So some of you may have seen the pictures of me at the Albert and the 91 Albert Street former Autonomous Zone building, which used to house G7 Welcoming Committee Records, Arbeiter Ring Publishing, the Mondragon Cafe, and Natural Cycles, and probably many more that I can't remember. And then we also went to Palmerston and Ruby on Friday, so those pictures were on my Instagram and Twitter accounts right away. And that was after I'd been in the city for only about an hour. So those first pictures of me in the red sweater at the corner of Palmerston and Ruby, I'd only been in Winnipeg for around an hour when that was taken. And, I got busy tweeting because that's what I tend to do, because I'm a hopeless addict to social media, which is another problem entirely. And I started getting like DMs right away from local people saying, "You're here, oh my gosh, and where are you now?" And one listener named Teresa was right around the corner when Dylan and I were over at the Burton Cummings Theater in downtown Winnipeg. So we dashed over, and I met Teresa. So hi, Teresa. And without Teresa's DM, I don't know if I would have seen her or met her. And we've been Twitter pals on here for like over a year. So that was really a wonderful experience right off the bat. So after a few sights and a solid lunch hang with Dylan, I got dropped off at the rental apartment at 79 Smith Street that I was sharing with my pal Scott Robertson. Scott is a name that you all should know because he's a PhD candidate at UCLA, and he's writing an education dissertation about the punk rock pedagogy of Propaganda. And so Scott has become a friend the past year, and you can find a Propaganda Instagram handle he made recently. So he's on Instagram at PropagandaPhD. So you can find that and follow him there. And Scott and I were like, yeah, we're on the Bangers Embrace, man. This is it. This is the thing. So Scott is just as much of a nerd about Propaganda as me and Keith, and I wouldn't doubt in the next few years if a Less Talk, More Rock 33 1/3 book series is released or something with Scott Robertson as the author. So Scott and I got acquainted at the Airbnb for a little bit, and then Tim McMiller from Protest the Hero texted me with his Airbnb address over by the venue. So Scott and I walked across the Assiniboine River over to Osborne Street where the venue is. We dashed up a few blocks from Osborne and Morley and met up with Tim, who has also become a friend the past year after he appeared on the Status Update episode. So Tim, Scott, and I grabbed dinner next to the venue. We got in line, handed out some stickers, and chatted with a few podcast listeners in line. So hey to Carter. Had some issues with my American vaccine card at the door, which is a piece of paper, essentially, handwritten, and not at all what Manitoba is doing with their plastic QR code vaccine card documentation. But I eventually got inside, and Weapons from the band from Saskatoon started right away as the opener. And I had to laugh at that because Saskatoon is the city where I did my master's degree between 2009 and 2011. And to be in Canada for the first time in 2 years and to have the opening band at the first show say, hey, we're from Saskatoon, was like a real trip.
So you asked why we love prop, and this is my answer. It's the tunes are bangers, but it's not the songs. The musicians can shred, but it's not the players. It's that of all the shows I've been to, and I've been to many, no band holds a dialogue of pure energy with their audience quite like Propaganda. Every prop show is like a conversation, a shared exploration of everything we hold to be vivid and true and living, and there is no release like the one I find at the prop shows this week and in all the years before.
So at the show, I found another podcast listener named Amanda to hang out inside the show with us. And Tim, Scott, Amanda, and I watched Weapons. And then we watched Choke from Alberta. And a lot of people from Edmonton and Calgary and Alberta in general. I've learned a lot about Choke this weekend. And the entire time, Tim and I were trying to decide if Choke's drummer was Graham, who used to be in Belvedere and played on my favorite Belvedere record, Fast Forward Eats the Tape. And eventually we did realize that it was Graham, which was a thrill because I love his playing, and I'd never seen Belvedere, so it almost got like a Belvedere experience watching Choke in general. So after Choke, Propaganda came on, and Chris walked out, and he's like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. But it was basically all systems go from there. And I have Jord's set list right here. So the set from night one was the following: Speculative Fiction, Dear Coach's Corner, Failed States, Devil's Creek, Negretto, Cop Just Out of Frame, Comply Resist, Adventures in Zucosis, Fuck the Border, Nation States, In Flagrante Delicto, which made its first ever live debut and was totally freaking amazing. Then Natural Disasters, which was a wonderful surprise. Without Love, Note to Self, Back to the Motor League, Failed Imagineer, Night Letters, which I think that was my first time ever seeing that song live because back when I was seeing the band live on the supporting cast years, Todd couldn't sing this one. Then Victory Lap, and then closing with Rattan Cane was bold. It was awesome. There was no encore any night, by the way, which I personally think is incredible. So I love that I got to see 7 tracks from Victory Lap live on night one because I'd never seen any Victory Lap tunes live. And I was just there for the new stuff, you know. I can't fully understand a record until I see it performed. I don't know if you all can relate how hard songs like Negretto, Zucosis, and When All Your Fears Collide are until you see it live, but seeing those songs live was the final piece I needed to loving Victory Lap as a finished piece of work, and it only took me 4 years after the release of that record to make it happen. So Opening with speculative fiction into Dear Coach's Corner, into Failed States, into Devil's Creek may likely be my favorite moments of live music that I've ever experienced in my entire life. My body was basically vibrating with joy. And like going back to what I said earlier, in a couple of years with so little international joy, these 4 songs in a row were absolute perfection because they're some of my favorite Propaganda songs in general. And I had never seen the band with Sue Lynn. I had not seen the band live since 2012 with Beeve at the Firebird, which no longer exists, in St. Louis. So here's my friend Sue Lynn that I've chatted with so many times on the podcast, just ripping. And I stood right in front of Chris on night 1, and there was no barricade on Friday night because it wasn't delivered in time. So the pit, which was filled with massed people, was super wild. And people kept crashing into us, which was fine. But the unbarricaded staircase leading from the floor to the stage at Park Theater needs a barricade, to be honest. And I'm old also, but for shows like Propaganda. So like I'm 6'5", and crashing onto women and kids sitting on a staircase at the front of a stage because somebody in the mosh pit knocks into me is not an enjoyable experience. Like I was relieved that night 1 was the only night without a barricade, just purely from a safety point of view. So it's really interesting that I got an experience without a barricade and with a barricade. So that's kind of cool as well if you think about it like that. But I haven't said yet that the Park Theater's liquor license didn't get approved, so nobody in the venue was getting drunk or drinking at all either. And I know the venue lost a ton of money, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. I don't really know, but if you've got $10 burning a hole in your pocket right now, you can get in touch with Park Theater in Winnipeg and PayPal them or something and make a little donation because I think that they had a big loss on the weekend. So just think about that. So moving on, one of the first people that I ran into in the crowd that I knew was Dwayne Larson, local photographer extraordinaire, upcoming guest on this podcast, and also the photographer of the legendary Tony Sly black and white portrait that adorns the cover of the Tony Sly tribute LP from Fat Records. Yes, you heard me right. The person who took that photo of Tony Sly lives in Winnipeg and was shooting fantastic pictures of the band all weekend. So another well-known local photographer named Joey Senf was up front working hard all weekend, and I didn't get to connect with Joey, which was my own fault, but her photos of the weekend are fantastic as well. So definitely go find Joey and Dwayne on Instagram for tons of photos of the entire Propaganda residency weekend. And I also ran into Sheldon Burney, our Dear Coach's Corner guest, in the crowd. Sheldon is just the raddest dude. And if you haven't heard his hockey chat on our Coach's Corner episode, I beg you, go check out Sheldon's section of episode 50, even if you just listen to that one section of the episode, because the times are all in the show notes. You can skip right to it. Sheldon is the legitest dude. I don't even care if legitest isn't a word. It doesn't matter. He wrote a book called Missing Like Teeth, which is a Winnipeg underground music history book that I look at regularly when we're doing episode research. Sheldon's oral history book includes stories from everyone in Propaganda, members of I Spy, the Bonaducci's, Painted Thin, Red Fisher, the Weaker Thans, Corpus Vile, Derek Riel, who was on our Rattan Kane episode, and he's a former Propaganda roadie and G7 employee, and much more. Like, Sheldon has done the work to document the scene from which Propaganda sprung, and you can get his out-of-print book still as an ebook for like $5 online, and I can't recommend it enough. So Sheldon slipped me a signed copy of his new novel, Down in the Flood. He also gave me a Lumbercats Hockey Club t-shirt, who are the opponents of Caress of Steel, the team famous for having Beeve, Chris, Wab Canoe, and Randy Frickus on their roster. So I thought it was a real bold move to get a Lumbercats t-shirt, but not a Caress of Steel t-shirt. But speaking of Randy, who was our guest on the Failed Imagineer episode, he was there and I frickin' missed him. And I had the best of intentions to see as many people as I could. And Randy, buddy, I am so sorry. I was getting 50 text messages an hour and 100 Instagram DMs an hour for a couple of days there, and Randy was an accidental casualty of my frazzled brain. So I'm very sorry, Randy. I failed you totally. And Keebler, I failed Keebler too. So I missed Beeve also. So Beeve was there on Saturday night, but he slipped past my attention. So go check out Randy's episode with Failed Imagineer. Go check out my guitar building episode with Beeve. And next time I'll see you, Randy, I promise. So, and yes, there will be a next time. So by the time Propagandy got off stage at midnight, which was 1 a.m. Eastern time, I had been awake for 24 hours or so, and I was totally wrecked beyond belief. I slipped Barney, Propagandy's legendary sound man and house engineer at the park, some stickers on the way out the door, and Amanda dropped off me and Scott at 79 Smith Street, and I slept the darkest and deepest of sleeps. And I awoke at 10 a.m. the next morning to a text from Dwayne Larson inviting me to go to breakfast with him at Roughage. And I set the agenda for Scott and myself. So brunch with Dwayne, then a visit with Sam Thompson from Witch Police Radio, then a driving tour of famous sites in Winnipeg with Jamie Fougere. So for brunch at Roughage, I had the vegan breakfast sandwich, tons of coffee, and order a potato salad. It was wonderful. We sat outside under overcast, cool fall skies. The rain held off. And we had just a total blast talking about trying to track down rare vinyl and cassettes from Propagandy. And Dwayne is looking for those early demo cassettes. So if any of you out there are selling, hit up Dwayne because he is buying. So then I hit up our pal Sam Thompson, host of Witch Police Radio, for a little backyard social distancing hang. Sam appeared on our Ska Sucks bonus episode. He had me on as a guest on Witch Police Radio, and he has over 600 podcast interviews with local Winnipeg musicians. Sam is like one of my go-to guys for fact-checking Winnipeg stuff, and he's helped me a lot since day one on the podcast. And the couple of hours we spent with Sam and Dwayne after Dwayne dropped me off at Sam's house were really, really wonderful. And he showed me the Kelvin High School yearbook where a certain teacher featured on the back of the How to Clean a Couple of Things 7-inch worked for many years, and where John K. Sampson, Stephen Carroll, and I think Conrad Sichler went to high school, and where Toothpick Hercules was formed. And interestingly, Kelvin is also where Neil Young went to high school. So Sam showed me that yearbook, which was really, really funny. And that picture wound up being like the cover of the article that Global News used for the article they did about the trip, which was hilarious. But I regretfully did not go past Neil Young's childhood home. It just slipped my mind entirely because I was so laser focused on Propagandy and Weaker Than stuff. So from Sam's house, my friend and collaborator of the podcast, Jamie Fougere, picked us up for a driving tour of Propagandy sites around the city. Jamie is a fantastic person, and Jamie did artwork for our Rattan Cane episode as well. So if you go look at the drawn logo from that episode on social media, that was Jamie Fougere's work. So also hi to Jamie's partner, Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. So Jamie took Scott and I to Kelvin High School. Then we went through the River Heights neighborhood, during which I sang Fine Day annoyingly at high volumes the entire time. Then he took us to Wolseley again, so Scott could see Palmerston and Ruby Street. Then we went downtown to 91 Albert Street, the former home of G7 Welcoming Committee Records on the 3rd floor, John K. Sampson's Arbiter Ring Publishing on the 2nd floor, the Mondragon Cafe and Bookstore on the 1st floor, and Natural Cycles, which is still in business, in the basement. I posted photos of 91 Albert Street and the office entrance on Twitter and Instagram stories too. So if you can't find them there, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram and I'll show you those pictures. They're pretty cool. So it felt pretty sweet to be at the office door at the top of the steps where G7 operated, and looking down through the giant windows to the picturesque street below was really, really cool. Because, like, you know, you think about this band, like their job with this label, how many times they must have looked out those windows, and it was just really, really cool to kind of be in that situation. And it almost felt like I was in like the East Village in New York City standing at that window. It's extremely picturesque on that street. So Jamie then took Scott and I over to the Manitoba legislature, to the site of the Golden Business Boy, as featured in the Weaker Than song One Great City. and the site of the empty statue plinth, which used to hold the statue seen on the back of the Let's Talk More Rock CD version cover. The plinth is now vacant after it was toppled during the demonstrations across Canada at the discovery of mass graves at the so-called First Nations residential schools in various parts of Canada, which have a history that is too in-depth to go into here. But if you don't know about this system, I implore you to go read about this collaboration from the Canadian government and the Catholic Church to remove First Nations children from their homes and assimilate them into white Canadian society. And these discoveries led to the creation of the first Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada just the other week. And so there are orange flags that were laid across the lawn under the plinth, which was marked with red handprints. Toys were scattered between the flags that represent the stolen childhoods of countless First Nations Indigenous youth. And being there in that spot at that moment was especially considering that, I was like thinking about this trip on what so many millions of people in the United States still refer to as Columbus Day. So Jamie dropped us at good old 79 Smith Street to rest and recharge for show number 2. And I dashed back over to Tim McMiller's lodging because other friends of the podcast, Jeff and Corey, had arrived from Toronto and wanted to hang. So I figured I'll rest when I get home, you know what I mean? And I dashed back across town and got on a solid hang with Jeff and Corey and Tim. And then I popped down to the show for a little walk by myself. And I'd been, socializing all day. So walking to the show by myself through cool, cloudy, misty Winnipeg evening in October was really nice. So let's talk about show 2. Show 2 featured a slightly altered lineup of bands with the local group Mobina Galore opening the show. Mobina Galore is a band that I was really excited to see. I ordered merch from Mobina Galore during the height of the pandemic, and I honestly don't know how Mobina isn't one of the most popular bands in Canada right now. Like, for real, how is this a just world? Like, Jenna and Marcia absolutely rip. They have great songs, memorable melodies, smart lyrics. I want to hear the songs again after they finish them. And I've been like humming all weekend long the Mobina Galore songs that got like stuck in my head like addictive earworms all weekend since the shows. So
I'll always run away. When the problem gets too big and I can't see another way, I'll always run right back. 'Cause I know it's only small and that I built it in my head. I just can't see another way, I'll be okay. I took a walk down to the city to see if I could find a place to stay, to spend some hours away. Not always feeling like a human cooped up inside, feeling like a bird trapped in a cage. Just wanna free us all from everything, from the highs and the lows and the ups and downs. There's nothing I can do but make an escape plan. I'll always run away. When the problem gets too big and I can't see another way, I'll always run right back. 'Cause I know it's only small.
if a band can get stuck in my head like Mobina Galore can, that's a really good thing. And I wish that they were far, far more popular than they are. So if you don't know Mobina Galore from Winnipeg, Manitoba, please do yourself a favor and find their songs and just enjoy. And Marcia's playing on the drums reminds me of Janet Weiss from Sleater Kinney, who is one of my all-time favorite drummers. And so powerful, so precise, so focused, and Marcia's backing vocals are just wonderful too. And if you want a clear picture of just how talented Jenna and Marcia are as vocalists, go watch their collaboration with Dylan James's Isolation Booth YouTube video project, where they cover an Alexis on Fire song, where they essentially duet the whole thing. And it's just wow. Like, the voices are wonderful. So
The grass is growing under my feet. I'm taking one blow before I'm too deep to run. The lineup seems endless.
I could only fantasize about having voices like that in my wildest dreams. So Jenna and Marcia, if you want to come on the podcast, shoot me an email at propagandipod@gmail.com. And because I'd love to hear the story of this weekend from your perspectives as well, since you performed and were at all 3 shows. So let's talk. But next, so Propagandy's Night 2 set list was slightly altered, and there were 6 different songs on the set list compared to Night 1, so it was a pretty big shift when you think about a set list being like between 17 and 19 songs. The set list from Night 2 was Back to the Motor League, In Flagrante Delicto, I Am a Rifle, which is originally by Rebel Spell and I believe was making its Propagandy all-time live debut, Lotus Gate, which was like, whoa, amazing, Failed Imagineer, Note to Self, Speculative Fiction, Negretto, Comply Resist, When All Your Fears Collide, Adventures in Zoochosis, Victory Lap, Rattan Kane, Dear Coach's Corner, The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist, featuring a Kiss snippet introduction, Potemkin City Limits, which I had never seen before, so this was very exciting. And then they closed, yes, they did, with Purina Hall of Fame. And I was like, oh, man, are you for real? Because I don't think they'd played that since like 2015 or 16 or something like that. So opening with Motor League and closing with Purina was like, get the hell out of here. Like performance-wise, Night 2 was my favorite. There is nothing like a Saturday night in Winnipeg seeing Propagandy.
Hey, Keith and Greg, it's Tom from Winnipeg. Just calling with response to the requests for stories about the Propagandy shows this past weekend. First of all, the Park Theater was incredible. Like, the renovations were awesome. And despite the obstructions from their liquor license, everything was great. And with respect to the show itself, I Am a Rifle, for sure, on the Saturday night was the showstopper. And that same night, Negretto was like a religious experience to be able to see that song played by that band in that venue in this city after everything that we've been through over the last year. So thank you guys for everything you do, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.
And then Duplicate Keys was on the written set list for Night 2, but it was crossed out on the back of the set list I got from Todd. So, like, I got that set list after the set on Night 2, and I was like, whoa, they were going to play Duplicate Keys. That means maybe they'll play it tomorrow. So, after Night 2, Todd pinged me, and I met him around the back, and I got to chat with Sue Lynn and Todd. I got to meet Ryan Nash from Agassi, who was on our This Might Be Satire episode. Snagged a couple of set lists, and Sue Lynn and I planned to get lunch the next day, and then Amanda took Sam, Scott, and myself all back to our lodgings, where I then proceeded to sleep the sleep of the dead. So Sunday morning, I awoke to absolutely gushing rain on the window and a message from Sue Lynn that we should get coffee and lunch. So I hailed a car, picked up Sue Lynn. We rode to Tom Bargain Coffee, which was so good, and I apologize if I mispronounced Tom Bargain. And then we went over to Stella's, a cafe on Portage across from the University of Manitoba campus, and we sat on the back patio at the table right next to the back door. I ate a vegan Mexican breakfast plate, a bowl of peanut soup, and a bowl of a dish of roasted potatoes. And then we just chilled and talked about life. We both wanted more coffee, so we went back to Tom Bargain a second time. Then I dropped off Sue Lynn for the pre-show rituals, and then I went back to 79 Smith Street, where I did a Zoom interview with Global TV in Winnipeg. And then I got a text message inviting me to soundcheck over at the venue. So Scott and I looked at each other and we're like, and we practically like ran out of the apartment to go over to the venue, where we met up out front with Jord and Propagandy stage tech, whose name I think was Robin, and sorry if that's the wrong name. We chatted with Jord, Todd, and the park manager, bar manager, Sammy, and then the band went down to the stage, and Scott and I found ourselves watching the band's soundcheck alone in the room with Barney, Robin, Chris, Jord, Todd, and Sue Lynn. So it was basically like a private show, and it was crazy. We saw them play Adventures in Zoochosis, Duplicate Keys Acaro, and With Friends Like These, Who the Fuck Needs COINTELPRO a few times each. So I think I saw COINTELPRO like 4 times total, like just on Sunday. Finally got to say hi to Chris after the sound check, which was super nice. I'm not there to make anybody's lives worse. And I know that, vocalists, whenever they're prepping for shows, socializing is a big deal, and mental headspace is a big deal when you're doing a show like that. So I was grateful just to be able to connect with Chris for a few minutes. But I feel like a kinship with Chris and Todd because my visit to Winnipeg is essentially the same nerdy thing that they did when they went to see Sacrifice in Toronto. So after I chatted with Chris a little bit, Scott and I went next door and had some tacos, which were lovely. So Scott headed back to Smith Street, and then I went for a walk in the neighborhood behind the venue, which was beautiful and quiet and peaceful on Thanksgiving Canadian weekend. So night 3 was a mixed bag for me emotionally, of course. I was overwhelmed by the idea of traveling again on Monday, getting to the airport. And then I also had put myself in a tricky situation where my car was in Hamilton, but in order to stay for the 3rd show, I had to rearrange my flights and they could only send me back to Toronto. So going into the 3rd show, I knew that the next day I was going to fly to Toronto and then I was going to travel like 70 or 80 kilometers to Hamilton, a different city entirely, to get my car. And then I was worried about the border crossing again in general. So I got the impression that the band, maybe Jord, was like a little gassed on night 3 too. But overall, it was obviously awesome because I didn't know where or when I was going to see Propagandy again, or even if I ever will. Like, what if I never see Propagandy again? Like, it's far from certain that I'll ever see the band again. You know what I mean? Like, I think I will, but like, it's far from certain. Like, anything could happen. And I hadn't seen Propagandy since 2012, and that was 9 years ago. So this weekend might be the last time I ever see this band. So that was running through my mind a lot. As I was going into night 3, the travel concerns, just the appreciation for seeing them 3 times in a row. And I just stood against the sound booth at the back right corner of the Park Theater, and I could just kind of let the evening wash over me. I really didn't even move. And at one point between songs, Chris said, "Hey, have any of you heard that Propagandy podcast from the States?" And I was like, "Oh boy." And I just like froze. And a couple hundred hands went up in the air and clapped, and I was just like frozen like a total dummy. And then like 5 or 10 people nearby were like pointing at me because I was wearing this like really distinct red sweater that I was like in social media on all weekend. So then Chris went on. He goes, "Well, guess who's here? Greg from the podcast is here tonight. He's been going around Winnipeg, seeing all the sights." And I was going to send him the coordinates for a little place just south of Portage called Devil's Creek. And then they went into the song, and I was just like so stoked. So if anybody out there has video or audio footage of Chris saying that, please send me an email at propagandypod@gmail.com or get in touch on Instagram or Twitter. Please, please, please. That would mean the world to me.
To drive an hour and find out it really is just a ditch. Here, this is free, Greg.
So the night 3 set list. There were a few variations from the other 2 nights. So the set list went like this: Failed Imagineer, Dear Coach's Corner, In Flagrante Delicto, Devil's Creek, Note to Self, Negretto, Duplicate Keys Acaro, which made its only appearance of the weekend, When All Your Fears Collide, Adventures in Zoochosis, Night Letters, Victory Lap, Rattan Cane, Dead Fascist, Fuck the Border, Back to the Motor League. Natural Disasters was written on the set list, but it wasn't played. Then they played With Friends Like These, Who the Fuck Needs COINTELPRO. Then they played I Am a Rifle. And then they closed with Without Love. So I think that's how the end of night 3 went because there was some confusion. But if anybody out there has a correction on my night 3 set list, feel free to let me know. So overall, there were 8 Victory Lap songs performed. 6 Failed State songs, 4 Supporting Cast songs, 5 Today's Empire songs, 2 Less Talk More Rock songs, and the cover of I Am a Rifle performed across the entire weekend. So I know people have opinions about this, but if I can't help but fantasize about what changes I would make to the set list. I might include an additional unpredictable Less Talk More Rock deep cut, like Preteen McCarthyist or Resisting Tyrannical Government, or maybe Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread from How to Clean Everything, maybe Bringer of Greater Things from Potemkin, because I know they have played that many times in the past, and it could be a quick one to relearn. And I'm also a hopeless devotee to Supporting Cast, so seeing the title track from Supporting Cast would have sent this set list into like stratospheric heights for me. But the inclusion of the song Potemkin City Limits was a really solid surprise that I didn't see coming. So maybe the Patreon poll choosing Potemkin for a future Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality episode lit a fire in Chris to put that song in the set. Who knows? But I'm glad it was there. But looking across the sets, I can't really think of major changes. It had some surprises. I Am a Rifle absolutely rips live, too, because Sue Lynn, Todd, and Chris all ping-pong the vocals back and forth, so that was amazing. But it made me appreciate the incredibly challenging nature of songs on Victory Lap, like When All Your Fears Collide and Negretto. Just seem like they're like virtually impossible to play. And seeing them do it live, especially there was a little hiccup, I think, between Todd and Jord in the performance on night 3, made me appreciate just how hard some of these songs are. Not that I didn't already appreciate that, but you know what I'm saying. So Monday morning, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to a pitch black Manitoba fall morning. I got packed and cleaned up. Amanda picked me up and said, we're going to make one more stop before I take you to the airport, and then we rolled up to Garbage Hill, the site of the legendary Winnipeg 1990s practically free music festival called Core Fest. And the Core Fest footage on YouTube is so good. You got to find it. But here's a little snippet from Core Fest in the 90s.
Core Fest is a wonderful, exhilarating outdoor experience with local acts, 65 of them over a period of 3 main days, 2 prelude days, and 1 lasting finale at the West End Cultural Center. It's a magnificent experience, as I said previously.
I think Core Fest is fantastic. It's rare that you get out to see, other than Lollapalooza, this many bands, 64 bands for $1. For like 3 solid days. You can get out there, you can go in a mosh pit, you can dance, you can walk around, you can do what you want. And for $1, it's like great entertainment. I'm having a super time, and I know the bands are having fun, donating their time to play.
So what do you think of Core Fest?
Well, it was pretty cool. I mean, anytime you can get 40 or 50 bands all playing for free, everyone pays $1 to get in, just has a good time. It's great. I mean, the people who arranged it are great. They got every type of music here, so it's great. You know, we love it. It was a great time. We just walked off, and we're half dead. We got so into it. But, yeah, it was really cool.
Did you like the crowd response you got tonight?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, from watching all afternoon, people seemed to be chilling and kind of sitting back. And when we hit the stage, they jumped up and went a little nuts. So it was fun, you know. It was really cool. And you need that. I mean, you feed off that when people are into it. You get into it, you know.
You find it different from playing in bars?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I mean, the sunlight alone is pretty weird for us. It's like the moon is on fire. You know, it's strange being out in the light. And outdoors, too. We're not exactly one with the outdoors. But, yeah, it's fun. I mean, I dig it. Different than bars for sure. But also, I mean, you got a couple thousand people sitting around here, and that's cool. You don't get that at the Albert.
I come from all the way from England, London, just for the Core Fest festival. And the Core Fest is great, man. Good bands, good people, drink all day, party all night.
What's the favorite bands you've seen so far?
Has to be Propaganda, I guess. Yeah, there are lots of good bands, good punk rock.
Touch my water. Earlier today, walking around, I saw a lot of people wearing shirts and patches with anti-racist sentiments on it. And that's really encouraging to see. And it's encouraging because if you think about it, how fucking hard is it to be a racist, sexist, or a homophobe in a racist, sexist, and homophobic society. It's not hard. So anyone who thinks it's fucking rebellious or radical to run around spouting off fucking things about homosexuals or minorities or anything, you're fucked. It takes way more courage to fucking challenge the patterns of privilege in this fucking stupid society and to refuse to inherit the racism that our fucking parents and grandparents have handed down to us. So fucking keep it up. And it's more than shorts and patches. Let's fucking get militant and get these fuckers out of our city.
Well, I think any event that takes place on this scale without any sort of corporate sponsorship and advertising, it's a great thing. Exposes a lot of independent bands here in the city, you know, to a lot of people, and I think it's a great thing for the city to have annually. Very cool.
It's hard to add anything to what George just said, but I guess it's a good place for people to come and share perspectives of the world too, and has a lot of potential, I think, to be a diverse cultural event. Like tonight, there's going to be the Neone powwow dancers. I think there should be more of that kind of stuff, so we aren't just seeing.
So after the airport drop-off, I went through security, had some hiccups with my baggage and my debit card, which was super fun. But then I ran into Sue Lynn at the airport. We exchanged our mutually exhausted haze and chatted for like 10 minutes, bid each other safe travels, and off I went. Which is when I started jotting down thoughts for everything that I've just said. And now I'm recording this in my living room back in Buffalo, New York. I was worried that I'd be sad when I got home. You know, like that post-show or post-festival depression. I was worried that would settle in. But like, this trip was so perfect, so utterly perfect in every way that I don't have any of that. I have no post-show blues, no post-show sadness, no deflation of my mood at the end. Just pure good energy from a trip that was everything I hoped it could be. And this weekend was defined by awesome conversations. Like, I wasn't lonely in a city that I'd never been to, which is something that I can't say about the city that I actually live in. Like, you know what I mean? I was not lonely at all. And I got to watch Propaganda perform 3 nights in a row. And then, I arrived in Winnipeg successfully, back in Buffalo successfully and safely with no real delays or struggles in travel. And it was just perfect. Just perfect. So overall, this weekend has been extremely powerful for me. I needed to get away from home for a few days. I needed to recalibrate. I needed to get off my computer, off work email, off GarageBand, off the news, off Zoom. I got out of the country for the first time in, like 20 months. And I don't know what the next year holds for me in life. I've alluded elsewhere on this podcast that I'm going through many transitions, just like many of us. But I feel particularly unmoored and slightly adrift right now in my life. But this weekend was just an amazing reset. And the amount of welcome and hospitality I received from people that I consider to be real friends in Winnipeg. I mean, the generosity and kind interactions with folks who have just listened to the podcast, or like the smiles through the masks where the eyes do all the talking and soaking up the atmosphere of the city. It's just all unforgettable. And I'm really, really glad that I went. So thank you to everybody in Winnipeg who came up to me and said hi. There were so many of you, and it was just so amazing and fun. Thanks to Sue Lynn, Todd, Chris, and Jord. Huge thanks to Dwayne Larson, Dylan, Sheldon Burney, Jamie, Amanda, and Scott. And thank you to Winnipeg. Thank thank you to, Tim from Protest the Hero and Jeff and Corey for the hangs as well. I'm going to forget things. You know what I mean? It's like I tried to just get all this story out of me while I had the chance. So if I missed you, I'm so sorry. If I forgot to mention you in this episode, I apologize. Thank you so much, friends. And I'll see you next time.